The PXL2000 Camcorder by Fisher-Price. Yes, that Fisher-Price. It's a camera specifically designed for kids. I'm the original owner of this. I've had it since 1989 when I was 14. This was my very first camera and I absolutely loved it. What else was it? Only the best gift my parents ever gave me. The very beginnings of Nowhere Video Productions, we're talking Generation 1, were captured with this camera. We used to shoot everything from skits, adventures, birthdays, Christmas, it didn't matter. I shot everything with this camera. Anytime I filled up a tape, I would play it back, connect it to a VCR, and I was able to save everything that I'd done so I could reuse the tapes. This is one of the tapes. This is an actual PXL2000 cassette. What makes it different is that it is actually a high quality audio cassette. So the formulation of the actual tape is much better than your typical 99-cent cassette tape. This was a 90-minute tape. You would get approximately 5 minutes per side. And the reason for that is that was the only way this little camera could keep up with the demands of recording video, by recording super fast. The controls are very simple. If you're familiar with a cassette recorder, it works in very much the same way. It's got your record, play, rewind, stop, and eject. So you'd open that drive up there, you put your tape in, and you were ready to go. In order to start recording, you would actually press record, but it wouldn't start rolling until you hit this switch in the back, like that. Then it would actually start recording. So essentially this was your pause button. So you could start and stop your recording at will very easily without stopping the camera completely. On the front, you've got a simple microphone, which unfortunately would not only pick up your people in front of the camera, but it would pick up the sound of the camera's motor as well, which was actually pretty loud. It actually sounded like it was rewinding when it was actually recording or playing. So that was definitely a drawback of this camera. But I never let it stop me. The lens is actually really interesting. It's a very simple lens. It turns in two directions and it says high and low. When you're indoors and you're in low light, you turn it to low. When you're outdoors, out in the sun, you turn it to high. And what that would do, that would basically put a polarizing filter over the lens so that your video wouldn't be overexposed. Pretty simple, right? Now it doesn't have an actual electronic viewfinder. It has essentially just a square lens attached to the top of the camera. And that's basically just acts as a pointer so that you knew what the camera was pointed at. Another drawback of this little guy, and one of the things that people griped about, was the fact that it took 6 AA batteries. This thing ate batteries for breakfast. I couldn't even tell you how many sets of batteries I went through. So you would put 2 in the front and then 4 in the bottom of the handle for a total of 6. Now there was another option for this camera. You could connect it to 12 volt DC through an adapter, which it did not come with. So if you wanted to do that, you had to find a universal AC adapter that would work with this camera. Now, I no longer have an appropriate adapter. I had to actually modify one to get it to work. I took one that was a 12 volt DC, but in order to get it to work, I had to cut it, flip the wire around, and re-splice it because of the polarity requirements on this camera. It's kind of weird. It's exactly opposite of pretty much everything else out there. You've also got a single RCA style jack in the back for your video output. This worked very much like an old school video game system. Anything that would have used a switch box on the back of it those old ones that say TV and game, it worked the same way. In modern times, you can use this with a coax style adapter, and you just have to plug it into something that's capable of reading audio and video, such as an old VCR with an antenna input. You set it to channel 3, and there you go. Now you can record everything that's on this camera. This is how I ended up making the programs called Audio Ventures. Audio was a word that I made up. It stood for video, audio, audio. It's something I made up, but the name stuck, and I started putting that on everything, including these cassettes here. You see it says Audio Tape 3. So I had 3 of these original cassettes that I got for this camera, and I used them over and over and over. I used them to death. But luckily, every time I filled up a tape, I dumped it onto a VHS tape and then went back and reused the original tape. But I gotta tell you, this was like the coolest thing that I could have ever received. Now, I've had this camera well over 30 years. It still works, although I've had to do some minor repairs to it. These days, there's not much reason to use a camera like this, other than artistic reasons. There is a small cult following for these things out there. If you look online, you look on YouTube, there's quite a few things out there. One of the biggest projects that I actually did with this little camera was a mini movie called One Night at Dan's. This was a movie I shot with Mr. Dan Bradley. Him and I reenacted a night that I had stayed the night at his house, and in which we got ourselves in a little bit of trouble. Looking back, it was pretty much nothing. It wasn't anything serious, but when you're a young kid, you're a teenager, it seemed pretty intense. People have really enjoyed it. I've since re-edited One Night at Dan's and to make it into an HD format with better quality, and I think it turned out pretty good. It's pretty raw, kind of gritty. It's interesting. So it's about a half hour long. But if you're curious to see what it looks like with this thing out in the field, check out One Night at Dan's. It's currently on Nowhere Video Productions on YouTube. And that's my story. And that's my PXL2000. Thanks for watching. I hope you found this interesting. If you did, please hit that like button, subscribe to Nowhere Video Productions for more, and we'll see you next time.